Very good. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Let's keep up at 7:30. So thank you for joining us. Thank you also to Daniel and the team for generating the notes, which are very good as always, very helpful, delivered in a very timely fashion. So the agenda is on the first couple of pages here. First thing to mention is apologies. So I did receive apologies from Councillor Liver, who sadly has a heavy cold, but she won't be able to join us. Paul here, so we seem to go. Yeah, very good, thank you. Right, so the second item on the agenda is any declarations. I'd like to a hand up for the team. No? Okay, thank you. Chairman's report. Other than the agenda tonight, I don't have any other items that I would like to raise. Anything else from the floor? Thank you very much. Okay, item 4. Have you received any public questions?
None received, Chair.
Bad. Very good. Okay, right. So let's just crack on through the minutes. So again, thank you for sort of compiling this. So item 5 is the first set, which is the corporate policy. The previous meeting on the 14th of June. I read through those. I don't have any issues. Are we resolved to accept the minutes from the 14th of June?
Yeah.
Just on the first page.
And then on the second page, that one that's been signed by.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next item, we have a previous set of minutes from the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee from the 11th of July. It's also circulated in the pack, chaired by Councillor Tom. Any comments, corrections to the minutes from the 11th of July?
Yep.
Unanimous with me, I would say. And the next item, under 6, is for the dementia-friendly Harpenden Working Party, which I actually thought was personally very interesting. I learned a few things there. So these are the minutes from the 20th of July. Thank you to Councillor Washington for chairing that meeting. Any comments, corrections for those minutes, please? Voted to accept?
Yes.
Thank you. I believe that's unanimous. Very good. Okay, thank you for that. So I guess move on to the main item, which is section 7 and the officer's report. So first of all is item 7.1. And again, thank you for putting together the forward planner for the remainder of the fiscal year. And is there anything you'd like to highlight on that for the benefits of the council?
Just for everyone to note that everything that was on the resolution track has been now marked as complete, and the next meeting there's nothing out of the ordinary on there. We go through setting the budget, so you've seen the first look tonight, and it'll be a second look next time, moving on to the final one in January.
Okay. Questions from the floor? Okay, so we're being asked to note and approve the planner. Any objections to the approval? Your hand up if you approve, please. Unanimous, thank you. And 212 is the resolution tracker, again noting that the actions have been marked as complete. And again, would you raise your hands if you approve those actions, please? Very much. Okay, so moving on to item 7.2, which starts on page 15 of the pack. So quite a bit of detail here. So I think we'll just be asked to sort of note the detail of the report, and there's an important release of reserves, which is set out in the appendix. Would you like to run us through this and to bring any key items to our attention be?
Yeah, of course, Chair, thank you. So the report reflects the position as at the end of July 2023. If I can draw your attention to Appendix A on page 19, it shows that in the year-to-date section, we're currently showing a favourable variance of nearly £38,000. If you look in the report in paragraphs 3.13 and 14, the main variances are the increase in the investment interest and the new commercial income stream we've got from the multi-use games area and the tennis courts in Northampton. Where applicable, these variances will be built into next year's budget that we'll discuss at the next item, but happy to take any questions.
I should know this, I've been a bit embarrassed, but AGP on APT,
Artificial grass patch. Acronyms in there.
yeah.
I was tempted to say mugger, but multi-use games area.
I did have a question. It's just underneath where Richard's just flagged up actually. Demolition costs of the Orchard, the new pavilion. We're aware, because we've had presentations, haven't we, from the cricket club, that there are two pavilions up on Rothamsted Park. And there's a figure of £100,000 for demolition. And I just wondered whether we really need to spend £100,000 on dismantling two wooden sheds. And I don't mean to say that facetiously, but they almost look like if you gave them a shove in a strong wind, they would come down anyway. So it just seemed slightly disproportionate in my view.
So I'll say to Clark.
Yeah, so the context of this particular figure, so when we were going through the discussions on the negotiations for the transfer of Rothampton Park, we were looking at various liabilities that the district council no longer would have as a result of us owning it. And that £100,000 was a contribution as part of the deal that the district council made for the future demolition of the pavilion. So we are not saying how much it's going to cost to demolish, but that is the figure that was part of the agreement with the district council as part of the transfer. So that's what we negotiated. You've been asked to release it this evening. That's not to spend it. That's basically releasing it out of the reserves for use in the general budget at the appropriate time. But what I would add is that, Chair, both pavilions, in particular the Orchard Avenue Pavilion, is an asbestos museum.
Yeah.
So the latest estimates to remove the asbestos as part of the demolition is about £30,000 at least. That's just for the Orchard Avenue, before you then go on to demolish. And for the Amberbury Lane Pavilion, there is asbestos in there, less so, but you're still looking at about 20 grand. So that's just the removal of the asbestos elements that will be covered within that £100,000.
Okay, so that's where that figure's coming from. Going forwards though, do we think there might be room for negotiation on those figures, or do we have to use fixed contractors?
So the answer to that, Chair, is that Council next week is considering a report on the pavilion project. As part of that, we start to talk about finances. It won't be until November Council that Council will have a set of recommendations from us as officers as to how we progress the three parts of the pavilion, which is the demolition, the build of a new one, and what we do with the car park for Orchard Avenue, whether we resurface it. So the financial package that we've got at the moment allocated is £400,000 in capital reserve, plus the £100,000 that we secured from the district.
Yeah.
So that is that £500,000 is the project fund for those three things.
Okay.
At the moment, we don't know how much of those things that will cover. We're almost certainly going to have to secure additional funding to do all three parts of that. But we will, and what's up for debate, Chair, is whether we do this in parts. So whether we have a contract to demolish and remove the asbestos and have a separate contract for the build of the pavilion, or whether it all goes into one contract. Whichever way that happens, it has to go through our procurement anyway. So that will be a large fields tender, which will go through the new processes to agree to tender. There'll be a period of procurement. People that are interested, companies that are interested, will bid to us. Those will be assessed, and then a preferred contractor appointed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Carl. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions on 7.2, which is obviously a backward-looking report for the current financial year? Okay, so I think we're just being asked to essentially note the report as opposed to approve it at this stage. But I have
every time I'm both.
Okay, so raise your hand if you have noted the report. Okay, but thank you very much. Right, so the next item is first look at the 2025 budget. So forward looking. So again, I mean, you sort of take us through this, and I think there's some detail here because as well as doing like your bottoms up calculation, and I do like the way you've sort of set out some of the pressures on the budget and thought, I think you've set that up, for a personal opinion, pretty well. There's a dependency from us on the district council for the calculation of their council tax for the future financial year. So we earn it in terms of agreeing a precept. So could you just walk us through that process and make sure the councillors fully understand that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Thank you. So, as I've said in the report, there's still some unknown variables that will take shape over the next few months that will culminate in us having a final budget in January. We will go to St Albans and ask for a specific precept that they will pay to us in 2 instalments next year. One of the key figures that we aren't aware of yet is the council tax base. That will affect our level of precept. So the council tax base is the number of properties that are billable in Harpenden. So once that figure is confirmed in December, normally it will then form part of the final budget. That's that stage. But for this report, the figures are presented as to keep service levels the same as they are at the minute without looking to increase in existing services, really. In Appendix A on page 26 of your pack, it shows the changes where, when the budget was set in January this year, or this financial year, we produced the medium-term financial strategy. So in that, it was estimating that it would be a 12% increase would be required for next year's budget. With the information we know to date, that's now been reduced down to a 9% increase, and those changes from the medium-term financial strategy to the first look are shown in Appendix A. With Appendix B, it shows the same information, but just some people find it easier to see the split between expenditure and income. So it's the same information, just shown in a slightly different way. I'll pause there and have to take any questions.
Any questions from the floor?
What did last year's out of interest, the increase? I know you estimated 12, but what actually was that last year?
No, so the 12% is what
Estimated for this year.
for this year.
And you think it might be 9.
Yeah.
But what was it last year? Sorry.
Sorry.
Is the question what was the actual precept increase?
Yeah.
This year that we.
The percentage increase last year from the year before that. So incrementally, what sort of percentage do we expect as a town our precept to increase by? I think that's probably a better question. Average precept increases are lower than 9%. And I just wonder if as a town we expect it to be about 9% or 12%, then we don't necessarily have to look any deeper to find ways either to justify it or try and save money, do we? But if that's what.
Yeah, is it based on a variation to inflation? So i.e. you tend to get RPI -2 or something like that.
That'd be built in figures.
It's different. So if the contracts that we've had have got, if they're inflated by CPI or RPI, then that's built into the budget. But so for this year, it was just under 9%. The year before, it was 7%. The year before that, it was skewed slightly because of the transfer of Rockhampton. So if you look at the figures, it was nearly 13%, but in real terms for us, it was only a couple of percent. But it's where, with the transfer of Rothampstead, there was a change in the special expenses between us and the district.
Okay. So it was 7, just under 9, and then we expect, if we're right about things.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. So I think one of the significant changes you made in the cost structure and capability of the town council in the last year, which is incidentally our personal support, is bringing the grounds maintenance services in-house. And as I understand it, there was dissatisfaction with the quality and value for money with the previous arrangements. You've decided to insource, hire staff, buy equipment, and so on. So I do my day job, so I get the logic, and I think I can see that made sense. So being where you are now, and it may still be early days because you're bedding down the team and so on. What is your sort of emerging sense of your ability to manage costs with the costs sort of insourced as opposed to outsourced? Is it better, worse? We're going to be able to sort of manage our costs more effectively going forward now that we sort of manage those resources directly as opposed to buying in the service from a third party?
So I think it's early days where we've got another 2 members of staff starting on Monday, and the majority of the new equipment coming in next week, Thursday.
Yeah.
So it's early days with that side of things. But I think certainly with the business case that we put forward to step away from John O'Connor and bring it in-house, I think certainly with the level of service we received from John O'Connor and the amount of things we're having to point out that aren't being done, when they're brought in-house, we'll certainly see an increase in the level of service because we're not constantly chasing grass to be cut or hedges to be trimmed or litter to be picked, whatever it might be. But for the cost side of things, I think we've got enough built in the budget to cover all those sort of eventualities that might come with an in-house service.
Yeah. Okay. So again, services contracts are different to buying sort of widgets and things. It's more difficult to manage quality and productivity. But do you have a sense that in-house there's more ability to drive better productivity, that is, get more stuff done for the same cost, and also better quality? Like you get stuff right first time. There's less rework. There's less chasing people to do something that wasn't done the first time. It's the sense that those things are working better now with the in-source solution versus the John O'Connor contract.
Yeah, so Chair, I think it's important to remember that this doesn't start until the 1st of April.
Oh, it hasn't started yet.
So the current John O'Connor contract runs to the 31st. Yeah. So we're building the internal team in advance of that contract changing, which has been.
So we're running the costs in parallel with the existing expenses to John O'Connor.
So the business plan that we shared at council last time, that was approved back in March, set out the whole kind of forecast of cost comparison to what we have at the moment with the current contract versus bringing it in-house. So the business case was to have some upfront investment on equipment and to bring in some town rangers early, around this time of the year, so we could have 6 months in advance of the contract ending to train, upskill, and do everything we need to do. So that was all built into the business case and all into the financial figures. So that implementation plan, which is what we're delivering at the moment, is going really well. And to answer your original question, there's nothing to suggest that the original figures that the business case was based upon are not accurate. And just as a reminder, the comparisons over a certain period of time, we did a 10-year forecast on that. So in year one, it's about £30,000 saving bringing it in-house. This is from a financial element. After year 3, we're looking at about 59,000 cumulative saving. After year 5, it's £153,000, and after year 10, it's £282,000. But when we set about the scoping of bringing it in-house, actually the key principle was about delivering to a higher quality and a higher volume, but within the same amount of money. We didn't set out to actually save money, but it was through the scoping and putting together the business case, we actually found that also was going to be quite a significant benefit. So there's nothing to suggest at this stage that is to change. In fact, what we're seeing from contractual costs, regardless of inflation changing, is that actually it's still costing even more to get things done. We know from our management plans that things that we were projecting might cost, Boardwalk's a classic example, boardwalk improvements down at Batford Springs are due to cost about £30,000, the latest cost is £67,000 to do the same thing. So that trend isn't going to change anytime soon. And we actually built in quite a robust risk approach to the numbers as well, so that actually they were quite worst case. So those figures I quoted there, that if inflation comes down slower than it was being projected at the time, which actually it has been, we would actually benefit even more so in terms of the cumulative savings. So it's all going in the right direction to what we forecast at the time. The crucial thing for us is come the 1st of April, when actually it's our job to get out there and do things. The context to it, as we've kind of spoken about council for a number of years, and certainly since May, what we currently pay for, we don't get, and what we do get isn't done to a good quality in the first place. So without doubt, we will be delivering to a higher quality and a higher volume from the 1st of April, and that will be noticeable.
Very good, thank you. I think the direction is more to the quality. I think the money comes the next. So I guess the scenario that Carl is projecting is quite satisfactory. I think one point to bear in mind, this is budget. So when we learn about accounting, budget is always there for change. But I think one of the costs that we can't really predict, and it might go beyond, if it's the question that we are talking about, is the staff cost, I guess, because you're billing 3.88%. But again, if the union come back, and then you have to, because we are now shifting the model from outsourcing to internalize all the courses. So if that percentage change a little bit, then the impact to us might be more than the previous years. But I think that provided that we still have a room for like absorbing it, it should be fine, right?
Chair, I've got 2 points to make. The first one actually comes off the back of what Carl said about the increase in, for example, the Batford Springs, and it is heartbreaking then, isn't it, when you read the reports that they've been vandalised and damaged, and it is something that I know the police are trying to resolve and do their patrols and things, and I do think they do a good job generally, don't they? But people should know that they are vandalised, and unfortunately that's perhaps one of the reasons why the price has increased, is they just have to be replaced, and it's a shame, and it's a complete waste of money. So, sorry, my second point was in respect of the capital receipts, and I know I'm sort of jumping forward, but it kind of goes back to one of the bullet points that you were talking about, Chair, on page 22. So I've put it as B, and the equipment expense for the new grounds and the town ranger service. I've heard about that in two ways over the last few months. The first was because we're saving money, we're actually able to buy the equipment that they need and the vehicles and things. But one of the things I wondered about was whether we could, rather than having it as a cost to come in to justifying the increase in the precept, whether we couldn't take some out of the capital receipts, because it doesn't come within any of the exceptions that we're not allowed to spend that capital money on. I know that's defined in 6.2 and referred to again, the amount that we've got in 6.3. So I didn't know whether we'd be able to use capital rather than have it as an item of expenditure that means that precept goes up by 9 as opposed to perhaps just under 9, which is what we had last year.
Yeah, Chair, so just to the context of that, so the business plan sets out £150,000 upfront cost was taken from capital originally. But the business plan was to then pay that £150,000 back over a 3-year period, so essentially topping back up the capital. So the money that you're seeing in the budget for next year is to top back up that capital reserve of £150,000. And all those figures are built into the numbers I gave you earlier in terms of the comparisons. So yes, you do have it. You could decide not to top that 50,000 back up, but then we wouldn't have the capital reserve for equipment costs. So when it comes down the line to start replacing things again, the idea is we created 150, we used it up front, we top it back up over 3 years, so that when we need to replace equipment again, we've got the funds already allocated in capital.
But
So-
we're saving that money then. So if we're saving that, then we could use our saving to top it back up as opposed to charging more next year.
Yes, you could. Yeah, Jane, you could decide not to allocate £50,000 within that, and do that a different way.
Sorry, I don't know whether that's difficult or
Yeah.
silly or I don't know. It
It's
just
probably the timing difference, isn't it? Because you don't actually, your savings don't kick in for 3 or 4 years. So in theory, you're not, you don't get the time benefit, but you don't get the benefit from those savings until after you've actually come to almost get the set of equipment replacement. Presuming that's the.
Yeah, and I think, Chair, what we try to do with this whole change in service is to keep it all within one distinct kind of budget account, if you like, or cost code. So we allocated 150,000 out of reserves, we spent that, and then we show how we top that back up over a 3-year period. So, and it's all currently structured in that way. You could do it a different way, where you say, actually, we're going to utilise what would be equivalent surplus from the service being in-house to do that. But you may be overly complicating it, potentially.
it just seemed to me that we can't sort of say on the one hand that we're saving money by bringing it in-house and then have it as one of the reasons why the precepts increased. You know what I mean? It just doesn't, I can't square that circle somehow, especially if we've already paid for the stuff in the first place. Sorry.
So if I can play back, I just think it's a really good question. I'll sort of play back my understanding at least. I'm not saying this is the final word at all, but I think it seems to me we've taken a relatively prudent approach where we're trying to maintain our capital reserves, rainy day funds. We've decided deliberately, personally support this to bring the services back in-house, but that does imply that we need to buy some kit and equipment to provide the tool, literally, give our people literally the tools to do the job, and equipment sometimes fails and other things.
Sure.
So we do need the money there to replace it, that liability sits now. So we have been sort of relatively prudent in sort of self-funding that capital reserve and keeping the precept at a certain level. An alternative could be to allow us to essentially run down that capital reserve to a lower level, probably still at a prudent level, but essentially that would allow us then to, by not topping it up, we're then able just to go forward with a lower precept for the next financial year. Is that one way of describing the options?
I think it's a timing point because the saving, so either you have a slightly higher precept now because you're paying for it and refilling up, but the savings will then come through, assuming they do, to the revenue. You'll have a lower precept later on, or you have a lower precept now. The savings has come through. You're going to reuse those to pay for the equipment, so you'll have a higher precept then. As I see it, it's a timing issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key thing, Jay, you've got options. There aren't options you need to decide what you want to do with now.
No.
That is something that when we come to the second look and after council next week, if there are any certain principles that are agreed in relation to the council tax increase, as an example, then we will take that principle away and come back in November with some other options, and that may include doing the town ranger service different. It may include actually some of the other variables that we don't know now may come in more favourably, and actually that might naturally bring us into a different position. So there is lots of options, and actually the very nature in which we do a first look, second look, it allows us to take this kind of step-by-step process as we learn more about the unknowns, and you've got more information to then kind of ultimately set where you want to be. So yeah, you have got options with the town range service. I think there is just one point to make, that it's not a sustainable approach to utilise any reserves to to fund your ongoing general services. And you can do it,
Right.
it's not sustainable because at some point down the line,
And that's including their
Yeah.
capital expenditure on equipment and tools.
absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So a really good example is during COVID. So COVID, like any council, we were hit by 15% loss of income. So yes, that figure was less than what you might see at a district council, but 15% for anybody is high. So part of the decisions and the options there were how could we utilise reserves that following year to help bridge the gap initially, so that it wouldn't mean that we would need a huge hike in council tax increase. Now at that time that decision was taken, and about 70 grand was utilised, which was a prudent thing to do at the time. But it was also very clear at the time that you can't continue to do that because eventually if you're funding 70 grand's worth of your general work out of reserves and you do that for 3 years
Yeah.
and the money runs out, all of a sudden you've got to find £210,000 of precept increase or you've got to stop doing things. And that's partly why we have the medium-term forecast. It's kind of a look into the future. There's nothing necessarily concrete about it,
Yes.
but it does allow you to do the sort of thinking that you're kind of talking about, Councillor Ray's talking about, where actually you could, if you went for a bigger increase now, that's going to save you the council some pain down the line, or you could do it a different way. And of course, there's all sorts of external factors that go into setting precepts as well that you might want to consider, and then lots of councils consider. So there's loads of options.
Yeah, the only the reason I wanted to raise it is because, and I'm sure we'll come on to it in due course, but I think we've all probably read the Citizens Advice assessment at the end. I think the sixth most difficult thing for people is paying their rent and affording their bills, and it's pretty most of the issues that people go and see the Citizens Advice Bureau about are the debts and the difficulties that they're finding themselves in at the moment. And it just seems to me that if there's a time to try and be more prudent and help people out, not having to increase precepts or keeping them at last year's level, or, you know, I just feel that if there's an opportunity to help families that are struggling, we should explore those. That's all.
Very good. Thank you for raising this one. Councillor Willis.
What's the 9% increase in monetary terms?
So whilst Dan gets that answer, I mean, the
£8.90.
context of the answer is that the percentage is always far worse than the actual reality. You know, Dan will give you the figures, but I think it's something like 17 pence a week. On average.
So 4.6 on page 23, and D, £95.
So that's the increase, yeah.
Was that the question, sorry?
No,
Was that the question? So it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you've got people going to Citizens Advice saying I can't afford what I need to afford at the moment, then another 10 quid is suddenly quite daunting, isn't it? Because it's something else that isn't being.
Yeah, it's a very, very fair point. I mean, what I would also add, and perhaps don't get into too much complications with the tax base, but might be useful for Dan to send an explanation about how the tax base has worked and how the collection rate that the district council has worked, because we don't get 100% of the council tax. There's a adjusted amount, and that adjusted amount is to reflect people that perhaps won't pay, don't pay. So actually a lot of people in the situation essentially that you describe are already adjusted for in the percentage that comes to us. What is absolutely valid, but there is an element of that that's already covered as well. And perhaps an explanation of how that collection rate is set is also very useful. That is one of the variables that we don't find out for a little while yet, and we were hit by quite a surprise probably 2 budget settings ago, where the district decided to lower the collection rate by a percentage that actually meant we all of a sudden had a gap of £20,000. So there is, you know, we have no control over that. It's a variable that we know more about by the time we get to council in January. The other thing to say on the tax base is Dan kind of alluded to it. but the figures in the first look are based on the existing tax-based figures. So normally they go up unless the collection rate is lowered. So there isn't any assumption that it will go up by 50 or 100. As we get to December, we normally get a letter from the district council saying this is what your tax base is and this is what the collection rate is. So, you know, another 50 properties on the tax base will lower that pressure on the precinct and reach another 100, you know, take account. So these are all things that will go in our favour as we get closer to setting the budget. And again, it's one of the reasons why we do this sort of step-by-step process to walk through it.
I had a couple of small questions. One, obviously, the Ranger service brings quite a lot more employees. I was just wondering what that actually meant from the point of view of minimum wage and living wage type things, and particularly because obviously those are open to potentially going up quite significantly, and how that feeds through into your cost base. You're taking on a lot of people now who are minimum wage at the bottom, and if you have a significant rise in minimum wage, does that put us in pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. One of the things we have to do with most of our employees here in order to attract people and retain good people is to set our salaries at probably a slightly higher level, not very high, slightly higher level than you would expect. So the reason I say that to answer your question is that the Town Ranger team aren't set at the lowest level at the moment. So there would have to be some significant changes to the bands below them before it even started to impact on them. And that was a change that was made. So when I arrived 7 years ago, there was quite a few roles on that lower level. But the council decided that actually Town Rangers in particular are some of the most important officers because they're out there looking after our assets. They're the people that residents see quite a lot. And there was a big shift to make sure that actually the way the staffing structure worked reflected their importance a bit more. Yeah. So there was some regrading a number of years ago. So we're kind of not at risk of the minimum.
So it's more like it from a risk point of view, right?
Yeah, there'd have to be some significant years of changes before it would start to hit their band.
And the second question I have is on investment income. Obviously, higher rates now quite significantly is flowing through in the banks. I think even like Barclays and Lloyds are giving you over 5%. And that, I would have thought, will produce quite a lot more investment income both this year and next, assuming it carries on, as they do. And actually becomes quite a swing factor on budget. 2 million of reserves, 56,000 pounds of income there, I guess.
Yeah, that'll be a big factor of the budget. And as we go through the process, that target may change as we go, because I think a big impacting thing for that is how the business plan is set over for the next few years, and how the projects that are decided to go forward and how much money they cost and how long we can invest for and things like that.
And I wonder, Chair, whether that's something that this group should perhaps look at, or the wider council, to give a bit of a view on these are the different investment strategies that you could have. So, for example, if there was a decision that some of those pots could be stuck away for a significant term, 6 months deposit, say, or even a year deposit, and capture those higher rates in a longer period of time. Just, there are obviously various strategies, and that, I agree, absolutely feeds into the other things we're going to do, but I'm not sure whether that will get lost slightly in the wider discussion around the budget.
Are we allowed to do that as a council? They're not risky, are they? You know, it's not like we're playing with people's money. They're even more secure, aren't they?
Well, just going to Lloyds Bank saying, I'll give you this for 12 months rather than I'll give this on a month or 6 months.
With our investments, it's very much a low risk, low reward strategy we have. So the main investments we have are 2 £1 million deals with Nationwide at the minute. So at the minute when they expire, they've been reinvested, and we are seeing those better rates. looking at the cash flow, the question that I've got to answer for myself is when one of the deals expires in December, whether that can be reinvested for another 6 months or whether we're going to need that more to hand in shorter term investments like the 32-day call account we've got. So that's the decision to be made in December for the budget monitoring, and then again to set a target for next year.
Just one clarification question to Councillor Ray. So, Councillor Ray, are you suggesting that we have like a standing item on the agenda just to keep track of these cash investments?
If you actually look at the budget, probably one of the biggest moving parts of the budget at the moment is how much interest we earn on our money in the bank. And this group, I thought one of the things it could be doing is looking at and thinking, at least looking at what the alternatives are. It doesn't mean it needs to change, but having at least examined and thoughts about what alternative strategies are and that we're optimising that.
So I would certainly support just having an update on the cash position, what accounts we're in, when they're maturing, thoughts on future investment strategy. I think that would be a good topic for this body to discuss from the next meeting. Would that be?
So just on that, Chair, so it is your role to consider that and make recommendations on the investment strategy to council on your forward plan that you agreed earlier. You're next due to do that on the 10th of January. We could bring that strategy forward to the next meeting in November if you wish to. I think that the wider information we will just pick up in budgetary control stuff as well, to be clear on that.
Well, what I propose, I'd like to get feedback from the floor is, we have a great report, and I think we just add a section, just give us a summary on the accounts, the balances, what interest rates we're getting, where is it deposited, when the accounts mature and so on, just to give the councillors more sort of transparency. There's quite a significant capital reserve. It just allows time to think through what we want to do as a group and as a team to husband those resources as best we can.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. Just to point out that is something that the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee receive as part of their remit, but I think it's fine to.
Okay, so I'd be proposing something additive to that, just this group a bit of transparency over the cash deposits.
I think in line with our strategy for the account. Remember when we approved the last year's account, we added a detailed note as an extra for the investment. So before the draft, there's no detail about the investment, and then we guys proposed to add an extra note to make clarification. So if that logic follow through in that our next meeting, we should talk about in the budget as a current position to look at the detail of it as well.
Yeah.
But I really want to point out one point that concur with Daniel is that our priority is to take more or earn more interest or return for the reserve. But actually, there's one more priority before that is Daniel can properly forecast the cash flow management. So he have to have the schedule of what money are going to spend or potentially going to spend in the next 12 months. And then after that, if we have extra reserve, then we can plan for a better return on that sitting amount. Because some of the sitting amount I see from the account is actually for safety reason. So it's just recently I read a lot of news about Birmingham and the council, so I'm kind of one or two more pool.
I think we're not getting into a Woking or a Birmingham situation, I think. Councillor Ray?
Yeah, and look, I think you have options. So, for example, you can have a 6-month deposit where you can break early if you need to for a cost, for example.
Yeah.
Generally, you lose your interest in that period if you really need to break it. I just think somewhere we need to show that we're sort of looking at optimising that as rates,
Maximising the return,
to levels which are more normal and probably more long term.
So just for clarity, because Dan was kind of alluding to, is that we already do that. So that already goes for the accounts and risk. And in the minutes, you've got the schedule of investments noted in the minutes that would have been circulated as part of the information bulletin. So that already happens. I guess the question is do you want to remove that from accounts and risks function and bring it here? Or do you want to do it at
How
both?
often is the Accounts and Risk Committee? Is that 3 times a year?
Quarterly.
Is it quarterly?
Also,
But I think it's good that, because if everyone want, we can bring it here so that we can collectively more, suggestion on utilizing those,
I think it just needs to be confirmed that people have understood it, looked at it, thought about it, so that when the budget process is looked at, presumably the main council of the budget process is, well, this has been looked at by this part, everybody's happy, they've done what they need to do, and we move on, rather than it coming up as questions in the main part. So possibly it is covered enough in the ordinary, but I think there is quite a lot to that piece, potentially, when you look at that budget and what are the things that could actually move around.
But yeah, I think what the suggestion is that we amend the forward planner, so we bring the investment strategy back forward from January to the next meeting. And as part of that, you can look at how you want to how the strategy works and looks, but also your process in the future as to what comes to.
I think so. Look, I mean, we're talking pretty substantial sums of money. I think there's a lot of expertise and interest from the group here. We're very much. I think broadly, no criticism. It's just. I think it's such a significant sum of money. I think it needs to be on the. I would like this to be on the agenda item for the future CPF meetings. But do you have an agreement with that proposal? Yeah. Thank you.
so the decision is open on audio is to CPF.
No, you haven't decided to do that. So
Well, I think we're covering potentially in both. So you do what you need to do in the risk meeting. But I would certainly like visibility in the discussion here.
It's a summary, isn't it?
I also think they're slightly different things. The audit and risk is what's the risks that you're taking around those.
Yeah,
Whereas I see this discussion more being what you're doing to optimise the returns.
yeah, exactly.
And if you like, I almost see the audit and risk being the check and balance on the other piece.
Yeah, but
It's slightly different, a slightly different look.
Is that clear? Because we've had a great discussion, and I think you have all of the councillors for their input. Do you?
yes, essentially, Chair, being frank, that's how it operates at the moment.
Yeah.
We're just going to bring the Treasury management strategy forward from January to November, and the things we'll ask you to consider there is all the things that
Okay,
we've spoken about. So
that's great. Thank you very much.
Forward a quarter.
Okay, right. So just conscious of time, so I'd like to close out this section 7. So, is there any remaining questions, comments on section 7.3, please? And just to cover the business, so we are being asked to approve the budget timetable and process as set out on page 23. So, all those in favour of approving the budget and process?
That's that amendment, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Second item is to note the budget and inflation assumptions set out in 4.3 and the impact from the precept on 4.6. All of those in favour of all the confirming that they've noted those items. That's a yes, thank you. And finally, noting the level of reserves as set out in sections 6, 7 and 8. All of those confirming that they've noted those items.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Right, item 7.4, which is the update from the Citizen Advice Service, which I personally find extremely illuminating. So say half of them sort of, often privileged, but some people, like this so easy. So I think this is a reality check for all of us. Are there any items you'd like to highlight on the report?
Not particularly, Chair, just it's the standard report that CAB give us. It's showing Q1, so April to June, they've helped 141 clients with 450 issues, which is good and bad, I guess. But hopefully there's no surprises with it's the same format as normal. You may wish to note that in the forward planner for council is to review the arrangement that we've got with CAB, so that's being looked at in November Council, where we currently provide them with the £5,000 as part of the service level agreement. That service level agreement expires in March next year, so it's just to preempt that, so that will be discussed in council in November.
So I can say, just to add, food bank on a Friday in Harpenden are probably feeding between 20 and 30 people every week. A third of which are children, sometimes half.
Is this
And-
Cold Harbour Lane?
No, this isn't the Salvation Army. This is the Trussell Trust one, which is at Crabtree Church.
Okay.
It's increasing, but they are obviously Harpenden residents as well. And the citizen advice are there probably 3 out of 4 weeks they're there supporting. So I think that's a separate support line. So this isn't just the full story. There's more on top that are being helped by the citizens advice, but not through this route.
Thank you. Councillor Rick?
Possibly a bit cheeky to ask them, but I did wonder whether it was possible to get some trends out. So the report's very interesting and somewhat alarming, but as it is, but it would be quite interesting to see whether things are getting worse in particular areas. And that sort of identifies that there's something that if we can, we should be doing something about.
I was thinking exactly the same. So I think it's a great sort of snapshot within a time period, but I think what would be helpful to all of the councillors is just understanding the changes over time.
Mhm.
So without sort of giving them a lot of homework, it's just, pragmatically and just be pragmatic about the key indicators. I don't want to create a huge amount of work, but just to tell the story sort of month by month, quarter by quarter over the last couple of years or something. Just something that tells the story, because I suspect some things are going up and down, and just help to understand the trends over time, exactly as Councillor Ray says.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Ellis?
Just a point of information on the debt side. I understand that most of the debt queries that they get are subcontracted to the, what's it called? Those people who work at St Saviour's Church.
Harpenden Money Advice Centre.
That's the one.
Okay.
Or their volunteers. So a lot of their debt, is get passed on.
Thank you. Okay, so just the action here is just to note the report. All those confirming that they've noted the report? Thank you. Right, okay, item 7.5, again, just something slightly different. So I'll be asked to approve the community grants, £1,968 to the Hawksmoor Family Support Services Organisation. And this is essentially to enable them to deliver a series of services in support of families and children with special educational needs. I've read this through, and I think the thing that came across to me, the great challenge is the sort of loneliness and social isolation that some of these families are feeling, which I can well imagine. So I'm keen to get thoughts from the councillors around the table on this grant application, please. Comments or questions?
Is this expected to be multi-year? Or is it just for 1 year?
I believe it's just for 1 year, councillor.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think its anticipated end date is April 24 on page 34. There's a time limit on the commitment.
I'm sure it's a desire of charity, having chaired the grants panel district for a few years, where you always get far more applications than there are funds available. So you have to develop, you have to make choices. You have to have a set of criteria that you apply. One of them, for one of the grant streams, is that it's not, a permanent commitment. I mean, the only thing I would say is that what they're going to do, craft activities and other support activities, a bit wishy-washy. How many, what will they be involved with, etc. I mean, I'm sure it's a good charity to support. It's just that, you need a process rather than reacting to individual applications.
Okay, that's a fair comment. So do we have a set of sort of objective criteria that we use to assess these applications? I think Councillor Race makes a fair point that there's many deserving causes out there, and we have to do the best we can objectively to make some choices. Do we have those criteria?
Yes, so they were agreed in November 2020 was the last time they were reviewed. So it will be due for review again at our next meeting, I believe. The criteria, and as part of that, there will be some of any award, some monitoring figures that will be required so they can show us what they've been spending the money on and the number of people they've been helping.
Okay. Councillor Ray?
The only question I had is, in the paper, it talks about them using Park Hall quite a lot. And I did wonder whether actually there was some benefit in, rather than giving them cash, give them a deal on Park Hall. Is that actually, because they also seem to have in their budget that they're paying £5,000 on room rental. I don't know, is there something to do there where they get a benefit, actually they're not doing cash and everybody benefits? Maybe not.
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's something that we've considered quite a lot in the past. Where we can, we provide in-kind support rather than the hard cash. The issue in this particular example is that we can't necessarily guarantee the Park Hall space. So for that reason, if we aim to give them in-kind support for Park Hall, but we can deliver on that, then they haven't got any money to go and book elsewhere. So that's the reason why this kind of one is more of a cash. A really good example of how we've done that in the past is with the local history society, who used to have the archive room, which is a room on the corner of Park Hall inside. You may not have never, it's there actually. So that was an annual in-kind support of the equivalent amount of what it would be to rent that. And so no cash ever changed hands. It was just that. So we do try to adopt that approach where we can. In this instance, if we were to support them, we can't guarantee the availability of the space. So it's better to give them the cash.
It sounds like, if nothing else, there's a circularity to it.
Yeah.
In section 10 of the form, their application form, they do mention buying bean bags and things, which you can see, if they're coming into a bare hall, and if they've got particular requirements for the groups that they're trying to help and support, then at least they've got a strategy, haven't they, an idea as to where that sum's come from. I mean, it's an odd figure to choose without any thought having gone into it. They could have just asked for £2,000, couldn't they? And they haven't. They've asked for a specific amount, and I don't know. I don't want to be cynical and think that they've done that deliberately, but it does look like they are looking to buy things that would benefit the group.
Brian's point, I know they said the criteria was done nearly 2 years ago. I assume this meets the criteria, and that's why it's arrived, and there's no quibbles on that.
Yeah.
In section 4, you're saying that we have an annual budget of £4,000 to support such community grants. In addition to this, the committee has approved the release of a further £8,000 from the earmarked reserves in November 21. And there's currently £4,000 remaining in the earmarked reserve. Again, I know it's not, we'd all like to say yes, but we have to ask the difficult question. So, and £2,000 we spend here is £2,000 we can't spend elsewhere. So just so I understand the remaining budget situation. So we've got 4,000 left. We spend 2,000 here. There's only remaining £2,000 in this financial year for other reserving causes. Is that the situation?
Yes, but it is, Chair, but we've also got 4,000 remaining in earmarked reserves. So if there were further applications to come throughout the year, we've got 8,000 for this year. So 4 in reserves, 4 in the annual budget.
So we've got 4 in the budget, 4 in the earmarked reserves.
Yeah.
So we've got 8 in total. So we spend 2, we've got 6 left.
Yeah. Okay. But then once that reserve has been fully utilised, we've still got the 4,000 a year going forward as part of built into the base budget.
Okay.
Presumably the original 8, when it was approved in November 21, that just, 4 of it's just never been spent.
Yes, that's correct.
How often do these come through?
It tends to be a bit
Ad hoc.
Yeah, I haven't noticed a particular trend. Obviously, we advertise it on our social media, and we've got a dedicated web page offering them, like making sure the organisations are aware that they can apply for the grants. But I think last year we saw a lot in the winter time with help around, say, Salvation Army and things like that. But it tends to be, I haven't noticed the trend.
I'm just wondering to what you said about it's not being claimed or allocated for however many years. Have we ever run it so it happens at a certain point in a year, so 1st of April or Christmas or whatever it might be, and actually get some kind of buzz around the community about it, and then 10 might come, and then we can make a decision on those 10 rather than it kind of just sitting there and not actually benefiting the community.
Yes. So
It feels kind of like dead money a little bit.
Well, but also it's about supporting, isn't it? We can create a bit of an event, not like a big party, but some kind of
I guess the
giving back story. And
the question partly is that 4,000 hasn't been spent, not been spent because there hasn't been decent applications, or is it been spent because we just decided? Sorry, is it not
we
been?
haven't had any
There hasn't been any applications.
Yeah.
Has it not been spent because there have been applications, but they just haven't met the criteria?
So I think, Chair, we rarely have we declined an application. We do get some ideas at times that don't meet the criteria, so they don't meet the screening. I think the demand for our grants has always been quite low, actually, despite doing some real big campaigns at different times, which is quite surprising. The context to increasing, to adding the earmark reserve previously was that post-COVID, we wanted to, we felt that there might be a different, or the council, when it approved the change, felt that there might be a different type of support needed with community groups and charities that were getting back on their feet after COVID.
Yeah.
So that's why the additional money was set aside, but also the maximum grant was increased. It only ever used to be £500. It got increased to £2,000. So we do a lot of campaigns and promotion, and the demand doesn't always come through. There is the option to different model. You create an application period, which has its pros. The big con is that you will almost certainly generate too many bids to what you can actually give out, and then the knock-on effect to the district community grant over there, you're actually letting a lot of people down. And because we don't have a big pot of funding to start with, it's quite a risky approach. But it's an option. It's something that can be looked at, and perhaps as part of the criteria when it comes.
I can see your point about letting people down. I could also see an argument that says, right, we've essentially run a competitive tender, and we're pretty confident we've found a really good home for this money for this launch or something. Not that this doesn't seem like a good home, but it's just responding ad hoc to an application submitted in good faith. It's hard to say this is the very best way we can benefit the community because there's no benchmark. So it's not,
we're not the only grant making body.
That's correct.
My wife's the director of the Helpington Trust, and they make water grants. The James Marshall Foundation makes plenty of grants for specific purposes, assisting people with education and so forth. So it may be that people are going to other providers rather than us.
It does slightly feel like potentially it's if you know about this, you have quite a big advantage over that.
Yes, although it's reasonably well publicised.
So in your experience then, Councillor Ellis, how would you say this compares to other applications generally that you've seen over the years?
We haven't seen that many, really. I mean, it's a bit difficult because I think district gives out about £400,000 per year, so it's quite a large programme. Of that, about 150 is service level agreements, in other words, with Citizens Advice, with Hightown, through the homelessness provision, etc. So those are quite big they've got about 4 streams, or the last I heard, there are about 4 streams, one of which is these SLA agreements. And then there are, other criteria. So you might give people a certain amount of money to buy a computer if it's some sort of small operating group. And they have definite application periods for those. So everybody piles in, and you always get many more applications than there are funds available. So you have to make choices. So you need a proper process for that. And you could always look at that process. It's been in operation for a long time. And one of the things I did, for example, is for the top end, the citizens advice and high town housing and so forth, you have quite a distinct process where you look at, first of all, you establish that they're, a valid charity, obviously. And then the officer, Peggy Sharp, she goes to visit them, she checks that the money is being spent as per their application, all that sort of stuff. So that's your maximum process. When I was involved in it, what I wanted to do was to make sure that smaller charities weren't deterred by the amount of process that they had to go through, particularly if the amounts were quite small.
Yeah.
Right. So you might have, I think we gave something to this group of people in Redbourne who deliver people, they're sort of like a voluntary taxi service, more or less, where they're taking people to hospitals and things like that. Now, again, £500 or whatever it was, small amount of money, but they just haven't got the people to go through all this process. It isn't necessary anyway.
Yeah.
So we have a graduated process according to the size. So therefore the applications vary according to that. Just simple ones at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think it's right. I can't help but think that the fact that there are so many applications at district level and some of them can't be fulfilled, can't be turned down, whereas we're sitting on a sum of money that we've effectively haven't had applications for a number of years. It just shows that people don't know, because if they're applying for district not getting it, not a problem.
Yeah, but maybe they're not Harpenden based.
But maybe
There are lots of smaller charities and small organisations in some of the less prosperous parts of St Albans, like Southport, for example.
Maybe we focus on that lower end
Maybe,
with less of a rigorous process, but still
Possibly.
due diligence.
possibly.
Yeah.
Maybe they're getting their grants from somebody else.
maybe.
Yeah.
I think in the circumstances, an application for £1,968 on the basis that it's justified, it's met the criteria, and we have the money there, would be something I was happy to support.
Absolutely.
Harpenden families who are asking for help.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions before we go to vote?
One other thing, it doesn't mention it, but quite often something like this, it's not so much the fact that they're activities, it's the fact they're coming together. And the parents meet up. It's the parents in the meeting, It says, many parents and carers are told they feel isolated or lonely due to the children's behaviours or needs. And it's that people coming together and talking and not feeling alone and isolated, which I think actually is is the benefit more than what is happening for children, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So although the children are just doing activities, actually the real benefit is the carers and the parents coming together and feeling less alone.
Yeah.
So I would say from that point of view, that would be definitely worth it.
Well said, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to call a vote. So I think we're just being asked to approve this application. All of those in favour of approving the application? Unanimous. And thank you for the discussion as well. That's very good. Thank you. Right, I think that brings us to the end of the agenda.
Can we just not lose the point on how we go forward with this funding? Because I don't want it to get lost for another 6 months. So
we'd like to in place a different structure or some, or just
I think we need to talk about it. I don't know what
revisit
the
the
answer is.
criteria?
Yeah.
Certainly for the next meeting, I can add the
Yeah.
review to the agenda.
Options about pros and cons and how we manage that.
All of those in favour? Very good, thank you. Okay, so I think we're down to any other business. Councillor Fisher, thank you. All right.
No.
Officers? All right, I think we can declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.